The display case was empty. That's what stopped me in the doorway. My husband had built that case himself, 31 years ago, in the garage on a Saturday afternoon, while I brought him iced tea and he measured twice before cutting once. It ran the full length of the shop's back wall. Deep mahogany glass front, brass fittings he polished every single week. He said a shop was only as good as how it presented itself. The case was empty. Every shelf bare, not one piece left. Arthur had been gone 14 months. I stood in the doorway of Whitmore & Sons Antiques on Birchwood Avenue and put my hand on the frame to steady myself. The morning light came through the front windows the way it always had, soft and golden, catching dust in the air, but the dust was different now, thicker, the kind that settles when a place has been closed up. My son had the only other key. I walked in slowly. My footsteps sounded wrong on the hardwood. The shop smelled like old wood and lemon polish, the same as it always had, but underneath that was something else, something stale. I went to the back counter and ran my finger along the edge. A month of dust at least. Arthur's ledger was still on the shelf below the register. I pulled it out. His handwriting filled every page. Item descriptions, purchase prices, what he paid and what he'd sold for, notes on provenance and condition. 31 years of his careful, deliberate hand. The last entry was dated 4 days before he died. Victorian writing slope, bird's eye maple, car, 1870. Purchased estate sale, Covington County, excellent condition. Reserved for the Hendersons. They'd been looking for one like this. I closed the ledger and held it. The bell above the door rang behind me. My son came in with his hands already in his pockets. 41 years old, and he still stood the way he did at 16 when he knew I was upset, shoulders forward, chin down, weight on his back foot. I didn't say anything, just waited. He looked at the empty case, then at me, then back at the case. "Mum, where is it, Warren?" He exhaled. "That's what I came to talk about. Where is the inventory, Warren?" He pushed his hands deeper into his pockets. Courtney found a buyer, a dealer out of Nashville. It was a bulk offer, $82,000 for the lot. The number landed somewhere in the middle of my chest and sat there. $82,000, I said. "It's good money, Mum. The shop's been sitting empty since Dad passed. You haven't been coming in. You said yourself you didn't know what you wanted to do with it. I said I needed time. It's been over a year. It's been 14 months. He looked at the floor. Courtney said we needed to be practical. We've got the new house, and the property taxes on this building alone are... This building is paid off. I know that. Your father paid it off in 2009. He made the last payment and took me to dinner to celebrate. Morton's. He ordered the good bourbon. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I remember exactly. Warren's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, the stuff is gone. The dealer came Tuesday. It's done." "Tuesday," I said. "I was at your Aunt Shirley's on Tuesday. You knew that." He didn't answer. I looked at the empty case. 31 years of Arthur driving to estate sales at 6 in the morning, coming home with the truck bed full, laying everything out on the dining room table to catalogue and photograph. Our dining room had served as a staging area more often than a dining room. I'd complained about it exactly twice, and both times he'd given me that look, the one that meant you knew who you married, and I'd laughed because I had. The Victorian writing slope he'd been saving for the Hendersons. The set of Tiffany-style lamps he'd spent 3 months authenticating. The Federal Period secretary desk he always said was the finest piece he'd ever found. Gone. All of it. Tuesday. While I was at Shirley's, "You had a key to this building for emergencies," I said. Warren finally met my eyes. His were red at the edges. Tired. Courtney said it made sense. That you'd never reopen the shop. That it was just sitting there losing value and you agreed with her. I thought, I know what you thought. Courtney appeared in the doorway then. She'd been waiting outside, I realized. She came in the way she always did, like she'd already assessed the room and decided it was hers. hair perfect, linen blazer, the kind of easy confidence that I'd once found impressive and now understood differently. She smiled at me. "Bev, I'm so glad you're here. We wanted to talk to you about this together." "I think you've already done your talking," I said. Her smile didn't waver. "We understand this is emotional. Arthur built something real here, and that means a lot." She touched Warren's arm. "But Warren has been carrying a lot of weight since your husband passed, and sometimes the loving thing is to let go. Fresh start. For everyone." I looked at my son. He nodded along. A small nod, barely there, but I saw it. "I'd like you both to leave now," I said. "Bev, I'll call you tomorrow, Warren. Right now I'd like to be here by myself." Courtney's smile flickered, just once. Then she guided Warren toward the door with a hand at his elbow. At the threshold, she turned. "We'll talk soon, Bev. We have some ideas about the building we'd love to share with you." They left. I listened to their car back out of the small lot on the side of the building. Then I sat down on the step stool Arthur had kept behind the counter for as long as I could remember, and I let myself cry. Not quietly. The kind of crying I hadn't done since those first weeks after the funeral. The ugly kind, the kind where you press your hand over your mouth and it doesn't help. Because it wasn't just inventory. Every piece in that case had a story Arthur knew by heart. The mahogany case itself, the hours, the whole 31 years of it. I cried until I didn't have anything left, and then I wiped my face with my sleeve and sat in the empty shop until the light changed. My phone rang at 8 the next morning. I'd barely slept. Unknown number. Nashville area code. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Beverly Whitmore?" A woman's voice. Older. Something careful in it, like she was choosing each word. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is June Patton. I own Patton Estate Acquisitions in Nashville." "Mom, I think I owe you a phone call." I sat up straighter in my kitchen chair. "Go ahead." "I purchased a collection of antiques this week from a man named Warren Whitmore. He told me the estate was being liquidated by the family." A pause. "He did not mention a living spouse." My hand tightened on the phone. "Mrs. Whitmore, I've been doing this for 35 years. I know Arthur Whitmore's work. I bought from him 3 times over the years, at shows in Memphis and once here in Nashville. When that young man brought me those pieces, I knew the collection the second I walked through it." Her voice changed. "I also found something I don't believe was meant to be included." "What did you find?" "I think you need to come to Nashville," she said. "I'd rather show you in person. And Mrs. Whitmore, you should know that I have not resold any of the collection. I stopped everything when I found what was in the secretary desk. I was in my car in 40 minutes. The drive to Nashville from our part of Tennessee is just over 2 hours. I drove it in 90. June Patton's warehouse was on the east side of the city, a converted brick building with a hand-painted sign and 2 loading bays. She was waiting in the parking lot when I arrived. 70s, white hair cut short, work boots and reading glasses pushed up on her head. She shook my hand. Her grip was firm. "I was sorry to hear about Arthur," she said. "He was one of the real ones." He was. She led me through the building. The warehouse was organized in a way Arthur would have approved of, pieces grouped by period and origin, everything tagged, wide aisles, good lighting. She took me to the back corner. The collection was there, laid out on a long work table, each piece exactly as it should have been. The Tiffany-style lamps, the Federal Secretary desk, the Victorian writing slope. I put my hand on the bird's eye maple and didn't trust myself to speak for a moment. "He only asked $82,000, June said, "for all of it. What is it worth?" She looked at me steadily. "I had my appraiser go through it the day it arrived. Conservative estimate. Retail value somewhere between $460,000 and $500,000. I sat down on the edge of the work table. "Your son either didn't know," June said, "or he did." I couldn't answer that. I didn't know the answer. She walked to the secretary desk and opened the top compartment. Arthur's pieces always had provenance documentation. I was checking everything in. She reached into a small interior drawer, not the obvious one, but a secondary one, recessed, the kind of hidden compartment that's only visible if you know exactly where to look. This was inside. She handed me a manila envelope, heavy stock, my name written on the front in Arthur's handwriting. Beverly. If something has happened and this collection has been sold without your knowledge, this is my fault for not telling you sooner. Please read everything inside before you do anything else. There are people who will help you. I love you. Arthur. My hands were shaking. June put her hand briefly on my shoulder and then walked to the other end of the warehouse and left me alone. Inside the envelope was a letter, 4 pages, handwritten, dated 3 months before Arthur died. He'd been watching Courtney for 2 years. It had started small, he wrote. Questions she asked about the shop's insurance value, a comment she'd made to Warren about the building being worth more as a commercial lease, the way she'd steered a conversation at Christmas dinner toward whether I had a will and whether the shop was in it. Arthur had spent his life reading people the way he read antiques. He knew when something had been refinished to hide damage. He knew when a piece was genuine and when it was made to look that way. He'd started keeping notes. Over 2 years, he documented what he could. Courtney's patterns, the way she isolated Warren from his college friends one by one, always reasonably, always with some explanation that made sense on the surface. The comments about my health. Bev seemed confused at Thanksgiving. Did you notice that Warren had mentioned not quite understanding? The time Courtney had asked, very casually, whether the building deed was in both our names or just Arthur's. He talked to a friend of his, a retired attorney named Jean Fowler. Jean had done some quiet research. Courtney's maiden name wasn't Hargrove, the way she'd always said. It was something else. She'd been married before, twice. Both marriages had ended with the husband's family losing significant assets. In one case, an elderly mother had been moved to assisted living after the daughter-in-law raised concerns about her cognitive decline. The family home sold within 6 months. The daughter-in-law was gone within 12. Arthur had written, I don't have enough to go to Warren yet. He loves her and she's careful. He would think I was jealous of his happiness or afraid of losing him. I need more. Jean thinks another 3 months and we'll have what we need. I'm sorry, Beverly. I should have told you sooner. I kept thinking I'd have more time. He hadn't. I read the letter 3 times. Then I sat in June Patton's warehouse and cried again, different from the day before. This was quieter. This was grief for Arthur carrying it alone, and anger, and something else I didn't have a name for. The feeling of being protected from beyond the point where protecting should have been possible. At the back of the envelope was a business card. Jean Fowler, attorney at law, retired. A handwritten note from Arthur. Jean knows everything. Call him. He's been waiting. Also in the envelope, a folded sheet of paper with 2 names, phone numbers and addresses. The first wife was in Kentucky. The second was in Georgia. I used June's office to make the calls. The first woman in Kentucky answered on the second ring. Her name was Darlene Mabry. She'd been married to a man named Hargrove, Courtney's first husband, the 3 years. Her mother-in-law had owned a small horse farm outside Louisville. By the time Courtney left, the farm was sold. The mother was in a memory care facility, and her son was $40,000 in debt on credit cards he hadn't known existed. Whatever she's telling people about your health, Darlene said, start writing it down. Date, time, exactly what was said. She builds slow. She's patient. She doesn't move until she thinks she has enough. The second woman in Georgia had a harder time talking. Her name was Roberta Keene. She'd been the first wife's best friend, not a victim herself, but a witness. She'd watched it happen. The pattern Darlene had described was the same, the slow isolation, the comments about cognitive decline, the asset that had to be sold for everyone's benefit. She almost got the grandmother's jewelry, Roberta said. The grandmother caught on. Smart old woman. I always think about her. Most people don't catch on until it's too late. I thanked them both and sat in the quiet of June's office for a long time. Then I called Gene Fowler. He answered immediately. "Mrs. Whitmore." I wondered how long it would take. His voice was dry and warm, the voice of someone who'd seen a great deal and remained steady through all of it. "Arthur told me you were the practical one. Said when the time came you'd move fast." "What do we have?" "More than enough," Gene said. "Between what Arthur collected and what I've put together since, we can document 2 previous fraudulent asset transfers she was party to. The credit card issue alone, if Warren has cards in his name he didn't open, that's a federal matter. And the sale of that collection without your authorization, given that the shop and its contents are marital property under Tennessee law and you're the surviving spouse, he can be unwound," I said. "The sale can absolutely be unwound. June Patton is prepared to cooperate fully. She told me this morning she won't release a single piece." "She knows you? Arthur introduced us 2 years ago. He was thorough." I closed my eyes. He was. I drove home that evening with Arthur's letter on the passenger seat, the same seat he'd sat in for 31 years of drives, to estate sales, to auctions, to the coast that one summer, when we left the shop with the teenager from next door in charge and worried about it the whole time, and came back to find everything exactly as we'd left it. The house was quiet when I got in. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with his letter and his ledger and my notebook. I wrote down everything I could remember about the last 6 months. Warren asking where we kept the deed to the building caught me admiring the building's location and wondering aloud if the foot traffic had changed since the highway rerouting. The dinner where she'd mentioned, very gently, that she'd noticed I seemed tired more often, that it was probably just grief, but perhaps worth mentioning to my doctor. She'd been building the same case she'd built twice before. My house was paid off, worth $380,000 in this market. The shop building was worth another $250. Arthur's retirement accounts had passed directly to me. All told me was looking at a potential score that made her previous 2 look modest. Warren didn't know any of it. That was the part that kept me at the table until midnight. My son wasn't cruel, he wasn't greedy. He was in love with a woman who was very, very good at making the people who loved her see exactly what she wanted them to see. The next morning, Gene came to the house. He spread everything across the dining room table. The table that had doubled as Arthur's staging area for 3 decades, and walked me through what we had and what we needed. We needed Warren. Not to convince him, not yet. To catch Courtney making her next move in a way Warren couldn't explain away. "She'll start pushing harder now," Gene said. "The collection sale was step 1. She expected it to go unchallenged. When she realizes it didn't, she'll either pull back entirely or accelerate. Based on her previous patterns." He tapped the folder on the table. "She accelerates." He was right. 2 days after my visit to Nashville, Warren called. "Courtney wanted to take me to lunch, just the 2 of us. She thought it would be good to clear the air." I went. We sat at a restaurant downtown, the kind with small portions and large prices that Courtney preferred. She ordered sparkling water and a salad and talked about Warren, about their plans, about how much she respected everything Arthur had built. "I know the collection sale felt sudden," she said. Her voice was warm and sincere, in the way a good performance is warm and sincere. "We should have included you more in that conversation." Warren felt terrible. "He should have called me. He should have called me. He should have fueled." "You're right." She reached across the table and touched my hand. "The truth is, Bev, we're a little worried about you. Warren especially. You've been through so much this year, and grief does things to people that they don't always recognize in themselves." She paused. "Has your doctor talked to you about support options? There are some wonderful programs." "I'm fine, Courtney." "Of course you are. I just mean the shop, for instance. You haven't been in since Arthur passed. And the building is sitting there. It must be a wait." She tilted her head. "We found a developer who's very interested." Mixed-use conversion. The offer is generous. It would let you simplify, take some pressure off. Which developer? She smiled. I can get you the details. The point is, you wouldn't have to worry about it anymore. Warren and I could handle all of it. All you'd have to do is sign. All you'd have to do is sign. I looked at her across the table. Her nails were perfect. Her posture was perfect. The concern on her face was perfect. I'll think about it, I said. She smiled wider. Of course, there's no rush. There was. I could see it in the timing. She had a developer. She had a number. She was ready to move. That evening I called Gene and told him everything she'd said verbatim. I'd been recording on my phone, a thing Gene had suggested and walked me through before the lunch. Tennessee is a one-party consent state. There it is, Gene said. That's the pattern. Give me 2 days. I gave him 3. He came back with something that changed everything. Courtney. Her real name was Catherine Pruitt, from Dalton, Georgia, not Courtney Hargrove from Chattanooga. Had a 3rd prior case Gene had missed the first time. Not a marriage. A probate fraud. She'd posed as a family friend and talked an elderly widower into changing his estate documents. The widower's adult daughter had filed a civil suit that settled quietly. The attorney who'd handled the original estate documents had filed a complaint with the state bar. There was a paper trail, a real one. Warren came over on a Wednesday. I asked him to come alone, and he did, although I could tell from the way he checked his phone when he arrived that he'd told Courtney where he was going. I had coffee ready, Arthur's ledger on the table. The folder Gene had assembled. Warren saw the folder and his shoulders went tight. Mom, if this is about the collection, sit down, Warren. He sat, arms crossed, defensive the way people get when they're hoping to be wrong and already afraid they're right. I didn't lead with accusations. I led with Arthur's letter, put it in Warren's hands and let him read. The colour left his face before he reached the 2nd page. Dad did this? He started 2 years before he died. He didn't tell me because he needed proof, and he didn't want to put that between you and him before he had it. Warren shook his head slowly. This could be. Look at the folder. He looked. The 2 prior marriages, the asset transfers, the credit cards. Gene had subpoenaed the records through the civil filing and found 4 accounts in Warren's name totaling $38,000 in charges. Designer hotels, spa treatments, 2 significant wire transfers to an account Warren had never heard of. Warren looked up. The wire transfers? I said. Do you recognize that account number? He didn't. I could see that he didn't. Courtney's been building a case that I'm declining, I said. That I'm not managing well since your father passed, that the shop is too much for me, the house is too much, that it would be better, kinder, to help me simplify, to sell things and put the money somewhere manageable. I kept my voice steady the way I'd learned to keep it steady in 31 years of business negotiations and 1 very hard year. She's done it twice before, Warren, 3 times if you count the probate case Gene found. Different name each time. He sat very still. I'm not declining, I said. I am grieving. Those are not the same thing. Warren set the folder down. He stood up and walked to the window and stood there with his back to me for a long time. Those credit card charges, he finally said. Yes, I didn't open those accounts. I know. He turned around. His face was the face of a man who'd been handed something he couldn't put back down. Where is she now? At your house, I'd assume. He took out his phone. He didn't call. He went into the account management app for his bank, the one we'd both used since he was in college. He looked at the balances. The account linked to the credit cards. His expression went very still. She moved money last week, he said, from the joint savings, $12,000. I saw the notification and she told me it was for. He stopped. She told me it was for a contractor quote for the kitchen renovation. Did you get a quote? We haven't talked to any contractors. He sat back down at the table. He didn't cry. He just sat there like a man who'd had the floor fall out from under him and was deciding what to do about it. "What would Dad do?" he asked. I reached into the folder and pulled out the last page Jean had prepared. "Your father would finish it," I said. "He spent 2 years trying to protect you. He died before he could. I think we owe it to him to do what he started." Warren looked at the page for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called Jean Fowler. 3 days later, Jean filed civil fraud claims in 2 counties, referral to the state AG's office for the prior probate case, and a formal complaint under Tennessee identity theft statute for the fraudulent credit accounts. June Patton filed a separate claim for the collection, which had never been legally Warren's to sell. On a Thursday morning, agents from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation knocked on the door of Warren's house. Courtney wasn't there. She'd left the previous evening. Warren had played his part perfectly. Went home that night, didn't change his behavior, didn't say anything. Jean had advised it. She can't know you know. The moment she does, she runs. She'd run anyway. By Thursday morning, she was at the airport in Nashville, a flight to Miami, then to somewhere with less extradition cooperation. She didn't make it to Miami. TBI agents met her at the gate. She had 2 bags, both oversized. In the second one, agents found $22,000 in cash, 3 prepaid cards loaded with a combined total just under the federal reporting threshold, a passport in her real name, and a second passport in the name no one had seen before. She argued all the way through security. Told the agents she didn't know what they were talking about. Told them her name was Courtney Hargrove. Told them Warren would explain everything. Warren was standing 30 feet away with me beside him. She saw us. Her expression went through 3 changes in the space of 2 seconds. Shock, calculation, and then something uglier. She turned on Warren first. "You have no idea what you've just done," she said. Her voice was calm, which was somehow worse than yelling. "You're nothing without me. Your father's little shop and your mother's little house, you think that's a life. I gave you something real." Warren didn't answer. She turned to me. "Congratulations, Bev. The calm was gone now. You've saved your precious building. Enjoy it." She looked at me with something that wasn't quite rage and wasn't quite contempt. "He was sick for 2 years before he told you. Did you know that? He knew he was dying, and he spent his last good months investigating me instead of being with you. Think about that. It was meant to wound. It did wound. I felt it go in. But I also knew Arthur. I knew why he'd done what he'd done, but he'd done because he'd written it in 4 pages of careful handwriting, and I'd read it so many times I had parts of it memorized. He'd protected me. He'd protected our son, the way he'd always protected us, quietly, thoroughly, without asking for credit. I didn't say anything back to Courtney. I just stood there with my hand on Warren's arm. The agents took her away, still talking. Her voice faded as they moved through the terminal. Then it was quiet. Warren exhaled. It was the longest exhale I'd ever heard from him. Something releasing that had been held for a very long time. "Let's go home," I said. It took 6 months for the full legal process to work through. Jean kept me updated as it went. Catherine Pruitt, Courtney's real name, entered a plea on 4 of 9 charges, 14 years. The Hargrove family in Kentucky was pursuing civil action to recover what had been taken from them. The Georgia case was reopened. The collection came back from Nashville in June Patton's truck on a warm morning in October. She drove it up herself. Warren and I were standing on the sidewalk in front of the shop when she backed the truck up to the entrance. We spent the afternoon putting everything back. Warren carried pieces in, and I directed placement, the way Arthur and I had done it so many times, him doing the lifting, me knowing where everything went. The federal secretary desk went against the east wall where it had always been, the lamps in the north window, the Victorian writing slope on the second shelf of the mahogany case, the one Arthur had built himself. When the last piece was in, Warren stood back and looked at the shop. "It looks right," he said. "It does." He was quiet for a while. He'd been in therapy since the fall, twice a week, a counselor his doctor had recommended. Some weeks were better than others. He was sleeping better. He'd started calling more. Little things, but they added up. I should have known, he said. She was very good at what she did. Dad knew. Dad had 31 years of reading things that weren't what they appeared to be. I looked at the mahogany case. The brass fittings caught the afternoon light. He saw it coming and he made sure we'd be okay. Warren nodded. He picked up Arthur's ledger from the counter. I'd brought it back in and opened it to the last entry. Read it. Closed it carefully and put it back exactly where it had been. What are you going to do with the shop? He asked. I've been thinking about it for months. Reopen it, I said. Part-time. Saturdays and Sundays, maybe a few hours midweek. I ran my hand along the edge of the mahogany case. I know enough about the inventory to start, and Jean knows an appraiser who's willing to consult. Your father kept good records. Warren looked at me. I could help. Saturdays. I looked at my son. You don't know anything about antiques? Dad would have taught me eventually. He shrugged, and for a second he looked about 15. Maybe you can teach me instead. I didn't answer right away, just looked at the shop. The slanted afternoon light on the hardwood floor, the pieces exactly where they belonged, the ledger on the shelf below the register with 31 years of Arthur's handwriting inside. Start with the secretary desk, I said. Tell me what you see. Warren walked over to it, looked at it carefully the way I'd watched Arthur look at pieces, not quickly, not for show, but like there was something worth finding if you were patient enough. Old, he said. Federal period, I said. Early American, probably 1810 to 1830. See how the veneer is laid on that top surface? He looked closer. Each piece of veneer is matched to the one next to it. That's called book matching. Takes time to do right. Someone cared about this piece. He studied it for another minute. How do you know all this? Because your father talked about every single thing in this shop, I said. For 31 years I listened. We closed up at 6. I locked the front door and stood on the sidewalk while Warren said goodbye and got in his car. I watched him drive down Birchwood Avenue and turn at the corner. Then I went back inside. I sat on Arthur's step stool behind the counter in the quiet shop. The brass fittings on the mahogany case caught the last light. The secretary desk stood solid against the east wall, everything in its place. His coffee mug was on the shelf under the register, the one he'd used every morning for the last decade, chipped at the rim, handle worn. I brought it back when I brought the ledger. I picked it up and held it. I'm still here, I thought. We're still here. That's what 31 years of marriage teaches you, if you're paying attention. The people who love you build things that outlast them, in the pieces of furniture they restore, in the shops they raise from nothing, in the notes they leave in places only you will think to look. Arthur had protected me the only way he could, and I'd done what he asked. I put the mug back exactly where it belonged and turned off the lights. So that's my story. And I've thought about it a lot since then. The part that stays with me isn't the arrest, or the collection coming back, or even the moment Warren and I stood in that shop and put everything where it belonged. What stays with me is the drawer. Arthur knew exactly where to hide something he needed me to find. Not in the house, not in a filing cabinet, not in a safe with a combination I'd have to dig through paperwork to locate. In the secretary desk. In a secondary compartment that only someone who'd spent 31 years learning how furniture was built would think to look. He knew June Patton would check the provenance. He knew she'd gone through pieces carefully enough to find it. He set up a chain of people and events that would only connect if the worst happened, and he did it quietly, without alarming me, without letting it poison the last months we had together. That's what I keep coming back to. Not the money, not the fraud, not the 14 years Courtney is going to serve. The thought that went into protecting the people he loved. I spent a long time being angry that he didn't tell me. I won't pretend I didn't. 2 years of carrying that alone while I sat across the dinner table from him, not knowing. I grieved that separately from everything else. The version of our last 2 years I could have had if I'd known. But the longer I sit with it, the more I understand what he was actually doing. He wasn't keeping me out of it. He was keeping me from having to watch my son's marriage fall apart on a suspicion that couldn't yet be proven. He was protecting Warren too. That's the thing about people who love carefully. They think about the collateral damage of the truth, not just the truth itself. What Courtney counted on was the idea that grief makes people passive, that a widow in her 60s, 14 months out from losing her husband, would be too tired and too sad and too uncertain to fight back. She'd watched it work before. She had a method and a timeline, and she was patient about it. What she didn't account for was that Arthur had been just as patient, and he'd started 2 years earlier. I think about Warren a lot these days. He's not the same person he was before all of this, and I don't think he should be. Something that happens to you like that. Loving someone completely and finding out the whole thing was constructed to take from you. That changes the way you read people. It can make you closed off and bitter, or it can make you more honest about what you're actually seeing versus what you want to see. I watch him look at things in the shop now, the way he slows down before he decides. He's learning to look twice. That's the part I want to say to anyone who recognizes something in this story. Not a lesson exactly, more like an observation. The people who tried to take from us were counting on speed, move fast, create confusion, be gone before anyone understood what happened. What stopped them, every single time, was patience. Arthur's patience. June's patience in not reselling a single piece. Jean's patience in building a case. Even my own patience in sitting across from Courtney at that lunch and listening and not letting her see my face. There's something in that. The willingness to slow down when someone wants you to rush, to look at what's actually in front of you rather than what you've been told, is there. Arthur taught that to me across 31 years of estate sales and appraisals. You don't look at a piece and decide what it is in the first 10 seconds. You look at the joinery, the veneer, the wear patterns. You ask what it's been through and who made it and whether it's what someone is claiming. People aren't so different from the things they make. I reopened the shop 4 months ago. Saturdays and Sundays, a few hours midweek. Warren comes on Saturdays. He's learning slowly, the way his father learned, by handling things, asking questions, paying attention. Last weekend he correctly identified a piece of federal period furniture by the inlay pattern alone. Arthur would have been insufferably pleased about that. The coffee mug is still under the register. I'm not moving it.